Chapter: The Atlantis Tour. As Miles adjusted his earpiece, Ana's voice chimed softly in his ear. "Dr. Shaw, before you continue with Helena, I've made a small adjustment to the translation system." Miles furrowed his brow. "What kind of adjustment?" "I've customized the vocabulary for Helena," Ana explained. She wouldn't understand the term metromite. For her, it's likely known as orichalcum, based on the glyph translations. I've mapped the terminology to ensure she comprehends what you're referring to. Miles nodded, appreciating the foresight. "Good call, Ana. Last thing I need is to confuse her even more." "Exactly," Ana replied. "This way, when you discuss anything related to metromite, she'll hear orichalcum instead, and vice versa when she speaks. It should make the conversation smoother." "Thanks, Ana," Miles said, glancing toward Helena, who was waiting patiently a few steps ahead. "That'll definitely help." "Anytime, Dr. Shaw," Ana said. "Good luck. And remember, building trust is key." Miles took a deep breath, giving Helena a reassuring nod as he walked up to her. "All right, Helena," he said with a small smile. "Shall we?" Helena tilted her head slightly, her emerald green eyes studying him as she gestured for him to follow. "Let's go," she replied, her voice calm yet curious as they began their journey deeper into the ancient city. Helena led Miles through the heart of Atlantis, her footsteps light and graceful as they passed the glowing veins of metromite energy that laced the walls and pathways. The ruins were both haunting and awe-inspiring, a blend of ancient elegance and futuristic technology. The soft hum of the metromite veins resonated faintly in the air, a reminder that this city was still alive in its own way, even after its fall. Miles walked alongside her, taking in the sights. "It's incredible how intact everything is," he said, his tone filled with genuine wonder. "Even after everything that happened, the technology still works." Helena glanced at him, her green eyes shimmering faintly in the ambient glow. "Metromite is the lifeblood of Atlantis. It powers everything, our homes, our machines, even the balance of our ecosystem. Without it, Atlantis wouldn't survive." They continued walking until they came across a line of circular pods, each resting in silence along the edge of a wide, glowing walkway. Most of them were damaged, cracked, or covered in debris, but one near the center looked remarkably intact. The pods, shaped like sleek metallic rings with open interiors, had veins of metromite running through their surfaces. Miles stopped, eyeing them curiously. "What are these?" Helena smiled faintly for the first time since their journey began. "Transport pods. They were used to travel along the walkways of Atlantis. Efficient, fast, and peaceful." She walked toward the intact pod, running her fingers lightly over its surface. "Most of them were damaged when the city fell, but some still listen." As if in response to her touch, the veins of metromite embedded in the pod lit up, glowing with vibrant energy. The ring emitted a soft hum, and the air around it seemed to shimmer faintly. Helena turned to Miles, gesturing for him to join her. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer. "Are you sure this thing still works?" Helena gave him a small smirk, a hint of playfulness breaking through her reserved demeanor. "You don't trust Atlantean technology?" Miles chuckled. "It's not that. I just don't want to be the guy who breaks a piece of ancient history." Helena shook her head, amused. "Sit," she instructed, motioning toward the center of the pod. Miles climbed into the circular seat, settling beside her. The pod's interior was smooth, its design seamless and intuitive. Helena tapped the glowing metromite vein on the edge of the pod, and the hum intensified. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the pod began to lift off the ground, floating effortlessly in the air. Miles's eyes widened. "No way!" Helena tapped the vein again, and the pod glided forward, following the glowing strips that lined the walkway. "The strips guide the pod along the pathway," she explained, her tone soft but tinged with pride. "They use metromite's energy field to lift and propel the pod. It's anti-gravity, a simple principle. For us, at least." Miles laughed softly, shaking his head in disbelief. "Simple for you, sure. Back where I'm from, this would be revolutionary." Helena arched a brow, glancing at him. "Your people haven't mastered gravity manipulation?" "Not like this," Miles admitted, leaning slightly over the edge to watch the glowing strips blur beneath them as the pod picked up speed. we're still stuck with wheels and engines. This is amazing. Helena allowed herself a small smile, her posture relaxing as she steered the pod effortlessly along the walkway. They passed towering structures covered in intricate carvings, glowing vegetation growing along the edges. Despite the city's decay, the beauty and ingenuity of Atlantis shone through. Miles glanced at her, his curiosity growing. What was it like? Living here? Before everything happened? Helena's smile faded slightly, her gaze drifting ahead. It was different, peaceful, harmonious. We lived with the world, not against it. Everything we built, everything we created, was meant to enhance life, not destroy it. She paused, her voice softening. But even Atlantis wasn't perfect. We were ambitious. Perhaps too ambitious. Miles nodded, sensing the weight of her words. And the Metromite? Was it your greatest achievement? Helena nodded. Yes, it gave us energy, growth, healing, everything. But it also became our greatest vulnerability. When the city fell, Metromite was both our savior and our undoing. Their pod slowed as Helena tapped the ring again, bringing it to a gentle stop near a small observation point. They stepped out, and Miles looked around, taking in the view of the floating city stretching out before them. Massive structures rose from the floor, their glowing veins illuminating the dark waters. Schools of fish swam lazily through the canals, their movements undisturbed by the quiet hum of the city. Helena leaned against the railing, her expression contemplative. Atlantis was meant to last forever, but even we couldn't escape destruction. Miles stood beside her, his tone gentle. Maybe it's not about how long something lasts, but what it leaves behind. Atlantis may have fallen, but it's still here, and it's extraordinary. Helena turned to him, her green eyes softening. You think so? I know so, Miles said, his voice sincere. And I think your people would be proud of how you've kept it alive. For the first time, Helena's smile reached her eyes. They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of the city's history pressing down around them, yet somehow feeling lighter in each other's presence. Miles couldn't help but feel a growing admiration for her, not just for her strength and intelligence, but for the quiet resilience that had kept her going all this time. Miles and Helena sat near the edge of a peaceful waterfall, cascading into a clear, glowing pool below. The sound of the water was soothing, a stark contrast to the eerie stillness of the ruins around them. The glowing veins of Metromite in the nearby stones shimmered faintly, adding an otherworldly beauty to the scene. Helena spoke about the ships of Atlantis, her voice calm but tinged with nostalgia. Once, our ships could glide across the water and through the air. Powered by Metromite, they were as much a part of Atlantis as the city itself, Helena said, her green eyes reflecting the light of the waterfall. Miles leaned back on his hands, shaking his head in amazement. Your people really mastered everything, didn't they? I can't even imagine something like that. Before Helena could respond, a rustling sound came from the bushes behind them. Miles immediately shot to his feet, his hand instinctively going to his holster. A large reptilian creature emerged from the undergrowth, its scales shimmering faintly under the glow of the Metromite veins. The lizard, easily the size of a small car, hissed softly, its forked tongue flicking in and out as it eyed them. Miles backed up, his voice rising. Helena, what the hell is that? Helena, unfazed, remained seated, her expression calm as she gestured for him to relax. Stay still, she said softly, removing her bow from her shoulder. Miles watched in stunned silence as she knocked the bow, her fingers pulling back slightly. As she did, a glowing blue arrow materialized out of thin air, its energy crackling softly. She pulled the string just a little and released, the arrow shooting forward with precise speed. It struck the lizard's side, not hard enough to wound it, but enough to make it hiss loudly and retreat into the bushes. Miles exhaled in relief, his heart still pounding. That was incredible! What is that thing? He pointed to her weapon, awe evident in his voice. Helena held up the bow, her fingers brushing against its sleek surface. This is Bow Tokai. It's powered by orichalcum. As I pull the string, the bow draws energy from the orichalcum veins embedded within it. The energy is shaped into arrows, and I can control the intensity by how much I pull. A small pull fires a simple arrow like the one you saw. A full draw can unleash explosions. Miles stared at her, shaking his head in disbelief. This is the most powerful and yet simplest weapon I've ever seen. Can I try it? Without hesitation, Helena handed him the bow. Miles accepted it carefully, feeling the lightweight but sturdy material in his hands. He raised it, aiming at the waterfall. Pulling back the string, he waited for the glowing arrow to appear, but nothing happened. Confused, he tried again. Is it broken? Helena chuckled softly, her expression amused. It's not broken. The bow tokai is registered to my DNA. Only I can use it. Atlantean weapons are designed this way, for safety and peace. If they fall into the wrong hands, they're useless. Miles lowered the bow, handing it back to her. That's brilliant and very Atlantean of you. I take it you weren't big on wars? Helena shook her head, a small, proud smile on her lips. Number Atlantis was a peace-loving civilization. We had everything we needed: energy, food, balance with nature. We didn't fight wars, but we did develop technology to defend ourselves if needed. Our weapons repository holds even more advanced technology, but each weapon is hard-coded to the DNA of its owner. My father registered my DNA to this bow tokai when I was young. Miles leaned back, shaking his head in admiration. That's genius. Your people really thought of everything. Helena's expression softened as she looked down at the bow in her lap. Her voice grew quieter. My father, he was a brilliant man. My mother, too. They were the ones who taught me everything I know about Atlantis. Miles caught the change in her tone. What happened to them? He asked gently. Helena hesitated, her gaze distant. When I was young, there was a massive solar flare. It was 150 years ago. The flare disrupted the magnetosphere and overloaded the orichalcum systems. The city, it burned. My parents took me to a bunker deep beneath the city. While everything above was destroyed, we survived. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. For years, they raised me in the ruins. They taught me about our history, our culture, and how to survive. My father showed me how to use the bow tokai. My mother taught me about the plants and the ecosystem. 10 years ago, they both passed away. Miles's chest tightened as he saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. He moved closer, his voice soft and steady. Helena, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine how hard that must have been for you. Helena nodded, blinking quickly. It was. But I've survived. I've kept Atlantis alive in my own way. Miles hesitated for a moment, then placed a hand on her shoulder. You've done more than survive, Helena. You've protected something extraordinary. I think your parents would be proud of you. Helena turned to him, her green eyes meeting his. For the first time, her guarded demeanor seemed to break, and a faint smile touched her lips. Thank you, Miles, she said softly. That means a lot. They sat in silence for a moment, the sound of the waterfall filling the air. Miles glanced at her, feeling a growing admiration not just for her strength and resilience, but for the depth of her connection to this lost world. You're incredible, Helena, he said quietly, almost to himself. Helena looked at him, her smile widening just a little. You're not so bad yourself, Miles. Miles and Helena moved along the glowing walkways of Atlantis, the faint hum of metramite veins accompanying their footsteps. The ruins of the ancient city stretched out around them, both majestic and melancholic, a testament to a civilization that once thrived in harmony with the world. As they walked, Helena's sharp eyes constantly scanned the surroundings for threats, her movements confident and purposeful. You don't need to worry, Helena said calmly, glancing at Miles. You're safe with me? Miles chuckled softly, though the tension in his shoulders eased a little. You say that with a lot of confidence. She gave him a small, knowing smile. I've spent my whole life here. I can sense danger before it arrives. Trust me. He looked at her, studying her calm demeanor. You're impressive, you know that? Helena tilted her head slightly, a hint of curiosity in her expression. Impressive? How? You've survived here alone in a world full of dangers. You've kept this place alive, Miles said sincerely. I don't know many people who could do what you've done." Helena's expression softened, but she remained quiet for a moment. Then, as they turned a corner, she said, "It wasn't a choice, it was survival. You do what you have to." Miles nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "Are there any others like you? Survivors?" Helena's smile faded, and her gaze dropped slightly. "No," she said quietly. "When the city plunged into the ocean 150 years ago, almost everyone perished. Those who didn't, they were taken by predators, and the ones who survived outside the bunkers mutated. The Scion, the creatures that attacked you in the cafeteria, they were once Atlanteans." Miles frowned, the memory of the creatures sending a chill down his spine. "Those things! They were your people?" Helena nodded, her voice heavy. "Yes, the radiation, the collapse of the ecosystem, the chaos. It changed them. Their minds, their bodies, everything. They are a twisted reminder of what was lost. Their minds are gone, consumed by the mutation. They exist only to hunt and kill." Miles exhaled slowly, his chest tightening. "And you? You've been alone this whole time." Helena's green eyes lifted to meet his. "Yes, my parents and I survived in a bunker. They raised me, taught me everything about Atlantis. But they passed away long ago. Since then, it's been just me." The weight of her words settled over Miles, and he felt a pang of sorrow for her. "Helena, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine how lonely that must have been." She shrugged lightly, though her eyes betrayed the pain she tried to hide. "I've learned to live with it. The city, it keeps me company." Miles stopped walking for a moment, drawing her attention. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met," he said earnestly. "What you've done here, preserving this place, keeping it alive, it's incredible." Helena studied him, her expression softening. "What about you, Miles? Where do you come from?" Miles hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I'm from the future, over 12,000 years from now." Helena walked in silence for a few steps, her gaze fixed ahead, her expression unreadable. Then, without looking at Miles, she finally spoke. "You say you come from the future, over 12,000 years from now." Her voice was calm, measured, but there was something else beneath it, a weight, a hesitation. Miles nodded. "That's right." Helena stopped walking and turned to face him, studying him carefully. "Then, tell me, Miles, if you can travel through time, can you change it?" Miles exhaled, shaking his head. We can't alter what's already set. History, your history, will always happen the way it was meant to." Her green eyes searched his face as if trying to determine whether he was lying. "So my people are doomed no matter what?" The question hung between them, heavier than the ruins surrounding them. Miles ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "Helena, Atlantis fell long before my time. In my world, it's a legend, a mystery no one has ever solved. But I swear, we're not here to interfere. We just want to understand, to learn what really happened." Helena's jaw tightened, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Then why are you really here?" Miles met her gaze, unwavering. "Because your world has answers my world desperately needs. Not just about survival, about balance. You built something extraordinary, Helena, and if we don't learn from it, we'll destroy ourselves the same way." She watched him for a long moment, then turned away, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. Not quite acceptance, not quite belief, but the seed of understanding had been planted. As they resumed walking, she spoke again, her voice softer now. "If you can't change the past, then maybe you can at least carry its truth into the future." Miles nodded. "That's exactly why I'm here." Helena's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't interrupt, waiting for him to continue. "The world, it's very different from yours. We have towering cities, advanced technology, machines that can do almost anything. But..." He trailed off, his face clouding with emotion. "But what?" Helena prompted gently. Miles sighed. "It's broken, Helena. The world is broken. People fight over everything, resources, power, control. Greed drives so much of what we do. Wars have destroyed cities, lives, entire nations. That's why I do what I do. Back in my city, I work to preserve history, to protect it from people who only want to exploit it. Helena tilted her head, her green eyes searching his face. You fight for history? Miles nodded, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Yeah, history is who we are. It's our story, our legacy. Without it, we're just, lost. But it's hard, Helena. So many people only care about what they can take. They don't see the value in preserving something for the sake of understanding it. That's why I hate wars. I've seen what greed does. It destroys everything. Helena was quiet, her gaze unwavering as she listened. Miles hesitated, then opened up further, his tone softer. I grew up an orphan. My parents died when I was young. I bounced from one foster home to another, never really belonging anywhere. History, it became my anchor. Studying it, protecting it, it gave me purpose. And when I learned about Atlantis, I thought, this place, your people, could teach us so much. You had everything. Balance, harmony, progress without destruction. It's the kind of world I wish I could live in. Helena's eyes glistened faintly as she absorbed his words. You see Atlantis as an ideal society? Miles nodded. I do. You were blessed with orichalcum, with this incredible technology, and you used it to create something beautiful. Not to conquer, not to destroy, but to thrive. That's why I'm here, Helena. Not to take anything, but to understand it, to learn from it, maybe even to honor it. Helena's lips parted slightly, her expression softening in a way Miles hadn't seen before. You mean that? She said, her voice almost a whisper. Every word, Miles replied, his gaze steady. I know what it's like to lose everything, Helena, and I don't want to see that happen again. Not to my world and not to yours. For the first time, Helena's guarded demeanor seemed to crack. She took a step closer to him, her green eyes searching his face. You're not what I expected, Miles! When I first saw you, I thought you were just another outsider, here to take what wasn't yours. But you're different. Miles gave her a small, genuine smile. Maybe we're not so different, Helena. You've been fighting to protect Atlantis, and I've been fighting to protect history. Maybe we're both just trying to save something that matters. Helena's lips curved into a faint smile, and she nodded. Maybe we are. They resumed walking, the silence between them no longer heavy but filled with a sense of connection. For the first time in years, Helena didn't feel entirely alone, and Miles felt like he'd found someone who truly understood him.